I took the graveyard shift at the All Soups in Carrizozo because Mike wrecked my truck and couldn't cover the tow bill. That's pretty much it. He'd borrowed the Silverado to haul some guy's furniture down to Alamogordo, made $40, and put the whole back end into a ditch off Highway 70. The tow came to $300 and change. Mike had $60 and a bunch of promises, so I needed hours. Fast ones. The Allsup's job came through a guy Mike knew from the rail yard, except there wasn't really a rail yard anymore, just some old ties and a chain-link fence behind the store. The manager called me on a Tuesday. Her name was Mildred Fernandez, and she asked if I could start that week. I said sure. She asked if I had reliable transportation. I didn't laugh. I told her I'd figure it out. Mike drove me in his girlfriend's Civic. The whole ride he kept saying he'd pay me back, that he had something lined up in Ruidoso, that it was basically a done deal. I didn't say much. I just watched the scrub roll by and thought about how I was going to pull graveyard shifts at a gas station instead of sleeping. The Allsups sat right on US 54, where the town kind of faded out. On one side, you had a couple of houses with those wooden slat fences, a closed-down trading post, and a church with a blue metal roof. On the other side, it was just empty land and the highway heading north toward Corona. The store itself looked like every other Allsups I'd ever seen. Red and yellow sign, big windows, 2 gas pumps out front that probably got updated sometime in the 2000s. The parking lot had that white caliche dust over everything. Mike dropped me off and told me good luck. I told him not to wreck the Civic. I went inside at 4 in the afternoon. The AC hit me first, that heavy cold air that smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. There was a kid at the register, maybe 19, and he looked relieved when I walked in. He didn't say anything, just nodded toward the back. Mildred came out of the office a second later. She was shorter than me, maybe 5'6", with dark hair pulled tight in a bun, and this square jawline that made her look serious even when she wasn't trying. She wore a polo shirt with the All Sups logo and a name tag and black slacks that had a permanent crease ironed into them. Practical shoes, the kind that didn't mess around. "Liam?" she said. "Yeah." "Mildred Fernandez. You're on at 10 tonight. I'm going to walk you through everything now so you don't have to figure it out in the dark." I liked that she didn't waste time. She sent the kid home and took me behind the counter. The training was pretty straightforward. She showed me the register first, how to ring up gas and cigarettes and the hot food nobody ever bought after 9. The system was old, the kind with actual buttons and a green screen that flickered if you looked at it wrong. She made me run through a couple of practice transactions, scan the chips, hit fuel on pump 2, run a debit card. I got it fine. Then she showed me the safe drop. There was a slot in the floor behind the counter, and whenever the register went over 200 in cash, I was supposed to pull the extra bills and feed them through. The slot had this metal flap that only opened one way. She made me practice that 3 times. I figured she'd had someone mess it up before. After that, it was the coffee station. 4 pots, 2 regular and 2 decaf, and a hot water spout for the gas station cappuccinos that tasted like powdered chemicals. She said to brew a fresh pot at midnight and another at 4 if anyone was around. Otherwise, just keep it from burning. "People actually buy coffee here at 3 in the morning?" I asked. "Truckers," she said. "Sometimes." The beer cave was next. It was just a walk-in cooler on the far wall with glass doors and rows of Bud Light and Coors and some local stuff I didn't recognize. She showed me how to restock it from the back and said to check the temperature log once a shift. There was a clipboard hanging on a nail. "Easy enough," I said. She looked at me for a second, and I got the sense she was deciding something. "There's a few other things," she said. "Okay. Store policies. Safety stuff." "Sure." She went back behind the counter and pulled out a laminated sheet from under the register. It was white paper, the kind you'd run through a home printer, with a list of bullet points in Times New Roman or something equally boring. The lamination had a couple of air bubbles trapped in it. She set it down in front of me. "Read this," she said. I picked it up. The title at the top said, "Night Shift Checklist," in bold letters. Underneath were 6 rules. The first one said, "Turn off the radio at exactly 1:16 a.m. Leave it off for 9 minutes. Turn it back on at 1:25 a.m. I read it twice because it didn't make sense the first time. The second rule, if the beer cave door clicks after midnight, lock it immediately and do not look through the glass. Wait until morning shift to open it. Third, if anyone asks for a map or directions to Oscura, politely decline. Do not provide written or verbal directions. Fourth, do not answer the back office phone after midnight, even if the caller ID says Allsups. Fifth, if you find ice cubes that feel warm to the touch, dump them into the mop sink. Do not let them touch standing water. Sixth, if you see a woman in a blue jacket standing by pump 2, do not go outside. Call this number immediately. There was a phone number written in pen at the bottom, 10 digits with a 505 area code. I looked up at Mildred. She was watching me with that same serious face, no hint that she was joking. "You want me to read it again?" she asked. I said. "I mean, I got it. Read it again." So I did. I went through the whole list a second time, slower, trying to figure out if this was some kind of hazing thing. New guy gets the weird fake rules, everyone has a laugh. But Mildred didn't look like she was setting up a joke. She just stood there with her arms crossed, waiting. When I finished the second read, she took the sheet back and slid it under the register again. "Those aren't suggestions," she said. "You follow them exactly." "Okay," I said. "I'm serious, Liam. Exactly. Got it." She held my eyes for another couple of seconds, then nodded. "Good. Let's go over the mop closet." She walked me through the rest of it, where the cleaning supplies were, how to lock the front door if I needed to use the bathroom, how to handle the pumps if someone drove off without paying, which almost never happened, but I had to log it if it did. She showed me the schedule taped to the office wall and said I'd work Sunday through Thursday, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And if I needed a shift covered, I had to ask her 72 hours in advance. "No call, no show. You're done," she said. "I don't care what the reason is." "Understood. Any questions?" I had about a dozen, but none of them seemed like the kind she wanted to answer. The laminated list was sitting under the register like a coiled spring, and I didn't really know what to do with that, so I just shook my head. "No, I'm good." "Okay. Be here at 9:50 tonight. I'll be here until 10:15 to make sure you're settled." "Sounds good." She grabbed her keys from the office and walked me to the door. The kid from earlier was sitting in a beat-up Toyota in the parking lot, scrolling on his phone. Mildred waved him off and he drove away. "You need a ride back?" she asked. "I'm good. My brother's coming." That was a lie. Mike was probably asleep or working on the ruidoso thing that wasn't going to happen. But I didn't feel like explaining, and Mildred didn't push it. She just nodded and got into a white Ford Explorer that had a rosary hanging from the rearview mirror. I walked across the highway to the old trading post and sat on the wooden steps out front. It was almost 6 by then, and the light was starting to go orange over the scrub. A couple of cars passed, but nobody stopped. I called Mike, and he didn't pick up, so I called his girlfriend, Angie, and she said she'd come get me in an hour. I sat there and thought about the list. Turn off the radio at 1:16, don't look through the beer cave glass, don't give directions to Oscura, don't answer the phone. Warm ice cubes, a woman in a blue jacket. It was weird, obviously. But I couldn't tell if it was the kind of weird that meant something or the kind of weird that was just small-town boredom turning into superstition. Maybe someone's ex worked nights and they didn't want her calling. Maybe the radio had some electrical short that acted up after 1 in the morning. Maybe Oscura was a bad spot where people got lost or ran out of gas and the company didn't want liability. I didn't know. But I also didn't really care. I needed the paycheck. Mike owed me $300 and change, and even if he came through, which he probably wouldn't, I still had rent and my phone bill and groceries. The All Soups gig was $8.50 an hour, which wasn't great, but it was 40 hours a week, and Mildred said they didn't mess around with the paychecks. That was enough. If I had to turn off a radio at 1:16 and pretend a laminated list made sense, fine. I could do that. I'd worked worse jobs for worse reasons. Angie showed up a little after 7 in the Civic. Mike was in the passenger seat looking sheepish. I got in the back and didn't say anything. Angie asked how it went and I told her fine. She asked if Mildred seemed okay and I said yeah, she seemed fine. Mike turned around and asked if they had good burritos. I don't know, Mike. I didn't eat a burrito. Just asking. I leaned my head against the window and watched the highway roll past. The sun was almost gone and the scrub looked flat and gray in the dusk. Somewhere out there was Oscura, whatever that was. I didn't know, and I didn't plan on finding out. I just needed to show up at 9:50, run the register, follow the list, and get my hours in. That was it. The first 3 nights were boring enough that I started thinking Mildred might just be superstitious. That happens out here. People get weird about things. I had a cousin in Vaughan who wouldn't drive past the cemetery after dark because her grandmother told her not to. Never had a reason. Just didn't. I figured maybe the list was something like that. The work itself was straightforward. I stocked shelves when the delivery truck dropped off boxes on Monday night. Mostly chips and jerky, some canned goods that didn't move fast but had to stay on the shelf anyway. Rotated the taquitos in the heated roller case every few hours. They never sold after midnight, but Mildred told me to keep them turning until 2 a.m., so they wouldn't get a hard spot on one side. I mopped the tile by the fountain drinks on Tuesday because someone had spilled what I'm pretty sure was a large Dr. Pepper and didn't say anything. The floor was tacky enough that my sneakers made a peeling sound when I walked over it. Ranch hands came through around 11 most nights, bought tall boys of Coors, and sometimes a bag of flamin' hot Cheetos or beef jerky. Paid cash. Didn't say much beyond thanks and have a good one. A few travelers stopped for gas, people passing through on their way to Roswell or Albuquerque, I guessed. They looked tired. Bought coffee even though it probably wasn't great. I didn't blame them. Long empty highways do that. The fluorescent lights buzzed the same way all night. That was the loudest thing most of the time. That and the hum from the coolers in back. I'd hear a car pull up maybe once an hour, sometimes less. In between, it was just me and the aisles and that sticky brightness that made everything look a little too sharp. I nearly forgot about the laminated sheet. I remembered it at 1:16 the first night because I'd been watching the clock. Turned the radio off right on time, felt a little stupid doing it, then turned it back on at 1:25. Nothing happened. Same country station. Same songs I'd heard twice already that shift. I figured that was it. Just a thing Mildred wanted done. Probably because of some old complaint or superstition that got written down and nobody questioned it after that. The second night I almost missed it. I was restocking the candy bars near the register, putting the Snickers in front because they sold better than the Milky Ways, and I saw it was 1:14. I finished the box, wiped my hands on my jeans, and turned the radio off at 1:16. Waited, turned it back on. Same deal. Normal static for a second, then the country station came back in. The third night, I didn't think about it until 1:15. I was in the back, checking the beer cave temperature log, 36 degrees, same as always, and I had to jog up front to hit the power button in time. I felt annoyed at myself for caring, but I did it anyway. That was Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Wednesday night was different. I'd settled into the rhythm by then. Knew which tiles near the coffee station were uneven. Knew the register drawer stuck a little if you pulled it too hard. Knew that the beer cave door didn't actually click on its own, at least not yet. And I was starting to think maybe it never would. The night was slow. I sold 2 coffees before midnight, both to the same guy in a Peterbilt who was hauling something north. He didn't say what. I restocked the napkins by the hot food station and wiped down the counters. Checked my phone a few times, but didn't have signal strong enough to load anything. So I just looked at the time. 1 a.m. came and went. 1:15. I was standing behind the register reading the back of a bag of Takis someone had left on the counter. I don't know why. Boredom, probably. The ingredient list was longer than I expected. At 1:16, I put the bag down, reached over, and turned the radio off. The silence dropped in like it always did. The country music cut out mid-lyric, something about a truck and a back road, and left just the hum of the coolers and the buzz from the lights overhead. I leaned against the counter, looked at the clock on the register. 1:16 and maybe 20 seconds. I'd wait 9 minutes, turn it back on at 1:25, same as always. Except this time, the silence didn't stay normal. It started maybe 30 seconds in, a faint crackle from the radio speaker even though the power was off. I looked up at it. The little red light on the front was dark, no power, but I could hear something, static, thin and distant, like a station that couldn't quite come through. Then it got louder, not a lot. Just enough that I stood up straighter and stared at the speaker mounted above the coffee pots. The static smoothed out into something else. Voices. Multiple voices. Layered over each other like different people reading the same thing at the same time but not quite in sync. I caught fragments. 17 north by 32 west. Wind direction holding steady. 16 confirmed. Repeat. 16. The voices were flat. No emotion, just reading. I couldn't tell if they were men or women. It all blurred together into this weird monotone that made my skin feel cold. I didn't move. The coordinates kept coming. Numbers I didn't recognize. Then something about air pressure. Then 16 again, repeated 3 times by 3 different voices that almost matched but didn't. My hand was on the edge of the counter. I realized I was gripping it hard enough that my knuckles were white. The laminated list was under the register, right where Mildred left it. I didn't need to pull it out. I knew what it said. Turn off the radio at 1:16. Leave it off for 9 minutes. Turn it back on at 1:25. It didn't say the radio would keep talking. The static shifted. I heard something that might have been Morse code, or maybe just rhythmic clicks. Then the voices came back. Adjusting for deviation. 16 Mark II. Do not proceed without clearance. I looked at the clock. 1:18. The voices stopped. Just cut out. No fade, no trailing static. 1 second they were there, and the next it was silent again. Except it wasn't the same silence as before. This one felt wrong. Too complete. I couldn't hear the coolers anymore. Couldn't hear the fluorescent lights. Couldn't hear anything. It was the kind of quiet that doesn't happen in a building with electricity running through it. Everything hums. Always. But right then it was like even the walls had stopped. I held my breath without meaning to. The air felt heavier. Or maybe that was just me. I don't know. I kept staring at the radio, waiting for it to crackle again, but it didn't. The red power light stayed dark. The speaker stayed silent. I checked the clock. 1:20. 5 more minutes. I didn't move from behind the register. My heart was doing something uncomfortable in my chest. Not racing, exactly. Just beating harder than it should have been. I told myself it was interference. Old equipment. Maybe a CB radio from a truck outside, bleeding through on some frequency that didn't make sense. That happens sometimes. Except I hadn't heard any trucks pull up, and the radio was off. 1:23. The silence pressed in. I realized I was holding the edge of the counter again. I made myself let go, flexed my fingers. They felt stiff. 1:24. I reached for the radio. My hand was steadier than I thought it'd be. I watched the clock, watched the numbers flip. 1:25. I turned the radio back on. The country station came through immediately. Clear, no static. Some song about whiskey and regret. The singer's voice sounded normal. The hum of the coolers came back. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like they always did. Everything was fine. I stood there for a long time. Maybe 2 minutes, maybe 5, just listening, waiting for the voices to come back. They didn't. The radio played 3 more songs. I didn't move. I kept waiting for the static to cut in, for those flat layered voices to start reading coordinates again. But it was just music. Just the normal late-night country station that Mildred probably picked years ago and nobody bothered to change. Eventually, I stepped back from the counter. My legs felt a little shaky. I walked to the coffee station and poured myself a cup even though I didn't want it. Just needed something to do with my hands. The coffee tasted burnt. I drank it anyway. I didn't look at the laminated list again that night. Didn't need to. I knew what it said. And I knew now that it wasn't superstition. Something had just tested the boundaries of the store. I didn't know what, but I knew the rules weren't funny anymore. I kept working. That was the plan anyway. Turn it into something normal by doing normal things. I grabbed the mop from the closet at 1:30 and filled the bucket with hot water and the yellow floor cleaner that smelled like fake lemons, the kind that burns your nose a little if you get too close. I wheeled it out to the tiles by the fountain drinks, where someone had dripped Sprite earlier, probably around 11. The sticky spot had dried into a tacky patch that picked up dirt. I dunked the mop and wrung it out and spread the water over the tiles in long strokes. The motion helped, back and forth. Dunk, ring, stroke. My hands had something to do. The radio played a commercial for a mattress store in Alamogordo. Normal. The coolers hummed. Normal. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with that constant electric whine I'd gotten used to after 3 shifts. All normal. Except my shoulders were still tight. My jaw hurt from clenching it. I kept seeing the radio's power light. Dark, off, and those voices coming through anyway. 16 confirmed, adjusting for deviation. I pushed the mop harder than I needed to. The Sprite was already gone, but I kept going, working my way toward the register, then back toward the coffee station. The floor didn't need it. I just needed to move. At 1:38, I dumped the dirty water into the mop sink in the back room and rinsed the bucket. I checked my phone. No signal. Same as every other night. I thought about calling Mike when I got home, just to hear someone talk about something stupid and unimportant. His ruidoso job that probably didn't exist. Angie's car trouble. Anything. I walked back to the register and stood there, looked at the laminated list under the counter. Didn't pull it out. Didn't need to. I'd already memorized the whole thing. At 1:40, a car pulled into the lot. I heard the tires first, that crunch of caliche dust under rubber. Then headlights swept across the windows and a silver Honda Accord parked near Pump 1. The engine cut off. Driver's door opened. A woman got out. 30s maybe. Sandy blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore a gray hoodie and dark running shoes, the kind people wear for actual running, not just walking around. She moved fast, not frantic, just efficient. Like someone who drives long distances for work and doesn't waste time between point A and point B. She came through the door and made a straight line for the counter. Didn't glance at the chips or the coffee or the cooler full of energy drinks. Just walked right up. "Hey," I said. She nodded, already digging in her hoodie pocket. "Do you have a map? Like a road map?" I started to gesture toward the small spinner rack by the front window where we kept the local tourist stuff. Carrizozo brochures, Smokey Bear postcards, a few folded maps of Lincoln County that nobody ever bought. "To Oscura," she said. She pulled out her wallet, flipped it open. I caught the name on her credit card before she shoved it back in. Doris Meyer, Visa, the blue kind. She didn't buy anything though. Just stood there looking at me. My hand froze halfway to the spinner rack. Oscura. Rule 3. If anyone asks for a map or directions to Oscura, politely decline and do not provide written or verbal directions. For a second I thought maybe she was joking, testing me, but her face was serious, tired around the eyes but focused. She was waiting. "I can't help with that," I said. My voice came out steady, probably steadier than I felt. "You don't have one?" she asked, not annoyed, just clarifying. "Printer's broken," I said. I pointed toward the exit. Exactly like the rule said. Politely decline. Do not provide written or verbal directions. I didn't even know why I said the printer thing. We didn't have a printer up front. But it felt like the kind of excuse that would end the conversation without making it weird. Doris Meyer's shoulders dropped. Not in disappointment. In relief. Like I'd just answered a question she'd been carrying for a long time, and the answer was exactly what she needed to hear. That bugged me more than if she'd gotten mad. She nodded once. "Okay, thanks." Then she turned and walked out. Same efficient pace. No hesitation. Got back in the Honda, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot, heading south on US 54. Taillights disappeared into the dark. I stood there staring at the empty lot. That was wrong. The whole thing, not her asking. Plenty of people ask for directions. But the way she reacted when I said no, like she'd been relieved, like she'd wanted me to refuse. I pulled the laminated list out from under the register and read Rule 3 again. If anyone asks for a map or directions to Oscura, politely decline and do not provide written or verbal directions. It didn't say why. None of the rules said why. I started to slide the list back under the register when I heard it. Click. Quiet. Metallic. From the back of the store. I looked up. The beer cave was maybe 30 feet away. Glass doors closed. Cooler lights bright inside, casting that cold white glow over the rows of Bud Light and Coors and local six-packs. I waited, listened. Nothing. Just the hum of the coolers and the radio playing something twangy about a river. I put the laminated list back and walked toward the beer cave. Slow. My sneakers squeaked a little on the tile I'd just mopped. The door looked normal, closed, handle in the locked position. But I'd heard it. A click. Not loud but clear. The kind of sound a latch makes when it releases. Rule 2. If beer cave door clicks after midnight, lock it immediately and do not look through the glass. I stopped about 10 feet away. The lights inside the cooler dimmed. Just a little, like someone had turned a dial down halfway. Then they brightened again. Slow. The whole thing took maybe 3 seconds. Dim. Bright. Like a blink. My stomach dropped. I stepped forward and grabbed the door handle and twisted the little brass lock on the side. It turned with a stiff click. Locked. I did not look through the glass. I kept my eyes on the handle. On my hand. On the lock mechanism. The door rattled. Not like wind. Not like the cooler motor vibrating. It rattled hard. Once. Like someone on the other side had grabbed the handle and yanked it. I let go and stepped back. The door went still. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the handle. Rule 2 said, lock it. Rule 2 said, don't look. Rule 2 didn't say what to do after that. I backed up toward the register, kept my eyes on the beer cave. The lights inside stayed bright now, normal. The door didn't move again. I reached the counter and stopped. My hands were shaking. Not a lot, but enough that I noticed. I needed to do something. Something that wasn't just standing here waiting. I pulled the receipt paper roll out of the register and tore off a long strip. Found a pen by the lottery ticket display. I clicked it 3 times before my hand steadied enough to write. 1:41 a.m. Woman asked for map to Oscura. Declined per Rule 3. She left. 1:43 a.m. Beer cave door clicked. Locked per Rule 2. Door rattled once after locking. I wrote the times as exact as I could remember. I wrote what happened in short sentences. Facts. Just facts. When I finished, I looked at the receipt paper. The ink was a little shaky, unrattled, but readable. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. Show Mildred, maybe. Or keep it. Prove to myself I wasn't making this up. Prove I was following the rules. Prove I was still in control. I folded the paper twice and shoved it in my jeans pocket. The beer cave door stayed locked. The lights stayed bright. The radio played another song. I stood behind the register and watched the clock tick forward. 1:45, 1:46. My shift didn't end until 6 a.m. I had 4 hours and 14 minutes left. At 2:12 a.m., the back office phone rang. I was wiping down the coffee station for the second time that night, something to do with my hands, when I heard it. 3 rings, sharp and loud enough to carry through the office door Mildred always kept propped open with a yellow plastic doorstop shaped like a wedge of cheese. I dropped the rag on the counter and walked back there. The phone sat on Mildred's desk next to a stack of invoices and a mug that said "World's Okayest Manager." The caller ID screen glowed green in the dim office light. It read, "All soups." That didn't make sense. I was already inside the store. The only other all soups I could think of was probably Roswell or maybe Ruidoso, but why would they call at 2 in the morning about anything that mattered? The phone rang again. I stood there looking at it, feeling stupid. Rule 4 said don't answer the back office phone after midnight, even if caller ID says all soups. But standing there in the quiet office with the fluorescent light humming overhead and the phone ringing, the rule felt thin, made up. Mildred was careful, sure, but maybe she was just anxious. Maybe she'd had a bad experience once and built a whole system around it. People did that. The phone rang a 4th time. I picked it up. "Hello?" I said. There was a pause, just static and a faint hiss. Then a voice came through. "Liam." It sounded like Mildred. Same tone, same rhythm, but wrong, flat. The way a recording sounds when you play it through bad speakers, all the texture stripped out, no breath behind the words. "Yeah," I said. "You missed a refrigeration alarm," the voice said. "The beer cave, temperature's climbing. You need to open it now to prevent spoilage." I gripped the phone tighter. I locked it, per the rules. Another pause, longer this time. The static got louder for a second, then dropped. "The rules," the voice said, "are only for people who scare easily." My stomach dropped. "You're competent," it continued. "Mildred told me. You follow procedures. This is a procedure. Open the beer cave, check the thermometer, adjust if needed. Bring the ice scoop with you in case the drain's frozen." I didn't say anything. "Liam," the voice said again. Same flat tone. "The product will spoil. Corporate will bill the store. Mildred will have to explain why you ignored a direct alarm." "The door's locked," I said. The voice paused. Then it pushed harder. "Unlock it," it said. "Bring the ice scoop. Do it now." I hung up. My hand was shaking when I set the receiver down. I stared at the caller ID screen. It still said all sups. The green glow made my fingers look sick. I pulled the phone off the hook and left it there on the desk, the dial tone buzzing faintly from the speaker. After a few seconds, it went to that fast, busy signal, then silence. I walked back to the register and grabbed the pen and the strip of receipt paper from my pocket. Unfolded it, clicked the pen 3 times and wrote 2:12 a.m. Back office phone rang. Caller ID said all sups. Voice sounded like Mildred, but wrong. Told me to open beer cave. Hung up. I refolded the paper and shoved it back in my pocket. My handwriting was worse this time. The letters slanted. I looked at the beer cave. Still locked. Light still bright. No movement. I stood there for a while, listening to the radio play some song about a truck and a back road. My heart was still going too fast. At 2:30, a freight train rolled through. I heard it before I saw the lights. Low rumble that built slow, shaking the floor enough that the register drawer rattled. The horn blasted twice, long and loud, and the whole store vibrated. I watched through the front windows as the train passed maybe 20 cars, all boxcars and tankers, no graffiti I could see. It moved south, same direction Doris Meyer's Honda had gone. Then it was gone, and the rumble faded and the silence came back. Right after, the ice machine thumped. I turned. The machine sat against the wall near the fountain drinks, white metal with a scratched front panel and a dispenser chute that dropped cubes into a plastic bin. It thumped again, louder this time, and started running. The motor kicked on with a grinding sound I hadn't heard it make before. Cubes started coming out. I moved toward it, not thinking, just reacting. The machine wasn't supposed to run on its own. It dispensed when you pushed the lever. That was it. I got close and stopped. The cubes coming out of the chute were steaming. Not a lot, just faint wisps curling off the edges, the way hot food does when you take it out of the microwave. The bin was half full already, ice piling up fast, and every cube that dropped added another little cloud of steam. I reached out and brushed my fingers against the bin edge. Warm. Not hot enough to burn, but warm enough that it felt wrong. Oily, too. The water slicking the edge of the bin wasn't clean. It left a residue on my fingers, slick and faintly chemical, and I pulled my hand back and wiped it on my jeans. The machine kept thumping, kept dispensing. I stood there staring at it, my brain trying to catch up. Rule 5. If I found ice cubes that felt warm to the touch, I was supposed to dump them into the mop sink and not let them touch standing water. I didn't want to need that rule, but the bin was filling, and the steam kept rising, and my fingers still felt slick. I stood there staring at the ice machine for maybe 5 seconds before my brain caught up. Rule 5. Warm ice cubes. Dump them in the mop sink. Don't let them touch standing water. I didn't know what standing water meant exactly. The sink when it was full, probably, or a bucket. Maybe puddles on the floor. I figured I'd just keep them away from everything except the drain and hope that counted. The bin was almost 3/4 full now, still steaming. The chemical smell was getting stronger, kind of sharp, kind of sweet, nothing I recognized. I pulled a wad of paper towels from the dispenser near the coffee station and wrapped them around my right hand twice. Thick enough I wouldn't have to touch the cubes directly. I scooped a handful out of the bin. They were warm, not hot, but warm enough that it felt wrong. Ice shouldn't feel like that. The steam curled off my palm and the paper towels got damp fast. I walked toward the back room, holding my hand out in front of me, and shouldered through the door into the storage area. The mop sink was in the corner past the shelves of backup inventory. Extra chips, cleaning supplies, boxes of napkins stacked to the ceiling. I dumped the first handful into the stainless steel basin and went back for more. It took 6 trips, maybe 7. The machine finally stopped running halfway through, the grinding noise cutting off all at once, but the bin was still full of warm cubes, and I wasn't going to leave them there. I scooped and dumped, using fresh paper towels every other trip because they kept getting too wet to hold anything. By the time I carried the last handful to the sink, there was already a shallow puddle forming in the basin. The cubes melted fast, way faster than they should have. I dropped the last batch in and watched them collapse into water within seconds, barely a sound. Just a soft hiss, and then nothing. The puddle spread across the bottom of the sink, maybe half an inch deep. Smooth, completely still. I was about to turn the faucet on and wash it all down the drain when I noticed the reflection. The ceiling lights were bright back here. 2 long fluorescent panels running the length of the stockroom. They reflected in the water perfectly, sharp white rectangles against the dark metal of the sink. I could see the edges of the shelves, too, the shadow of a box near the left side. And I could see a shape standing in the stockroom doorway. Tall, narrow, wearing something dark that might have been a uniform. The reflection was clear enough I could make out shoulders, a collar, the suggestion of a cap or hat. I didn't move, just stared down into the puddle, my hands still over the sink, paper towels dripping onto the floor. The shape didn't move either. I wanted to look up, check the doorway, confirm what I already knew, which was that nobody was there, that I'd been alone in the store since Doris Meyer left over an hour ago. But I couldn't stop looking at the reflection because it was so clear, so detailed. And I didn't understand how the puddle could show me something that wasn't real. My heart was doing that thing again where it beat too hard. I could feel it in my throat. I counted to 3 in my head. Then I spun around. The stockroom doorway was empty. Just the door I'd come through, half open, the edge of the register counter visible through the gap. Fluorescent light spilling across the tile. No one standing there. No shape. No uniform. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. When I looked back down at the sink, the puddle was still there, still reflecting the ceiling lights. Except it wasn't. The lights were wrong. Harsher. Whiter. The kind of industrial fluorescence you'd see in a hospital or a government building, not the slightly yellowed panels we had in the stockroom. And they weren't above me. They were running horizontal, stretching away into the distance, lining the ceiling of a long hallway I'd never seen before. The hallway was narrow. Concrete walls painted some pale color, maybe beige, maybe gray. The lights reflected off the floor, which looked like polished linoleum. There were doors along the sides, metal doors with small windows set at eye level, the glass dark. And at the far end, something was moving. I couldn't make out what it was, just motion, a shift in the light maybe, or a shadow that didn't match the rest of the hallway. It was too far away to see clearly, but I got the feeling it had noticed me, that it was turning, orienting itself, looking back. I jerked away from the sink and my hip hit the edge of the shelf behind me. A box of napkins tipped and fell, but I didn't catch it. I just stood there, breathing hard, staring at the puddle from 3 feet away. The reflection didn't change. The hallway was still there. The lights, the doors, the thing at the end. Closer now, I thought. Maybe. I lunged forward and twisted the faucet on full blast. Water hammered into the basin, loud and cold, flooding the shallow puddle and drowning the reflection in seconds. I stood there and watched the water swirl and rise, washing away the last of the melted ice, erasing the hallway and the lights and whatever had been moving toward me. The drain gurgled. The water kept running. I didn't turn it off until the basin was completely clean, every trace of the puddle gone. Nothing left but steel and tap water and the normal reflection of the stockroom ceiling above me. My hands were shaking again. I turned the faucet off and stepped back. The stockroom looked normal. Shelves, boxes, mop bucket in the corner, cleaning supplies on the wire rack. The doorway was still empty. The fluorescent lights overhead were the same yellowed panels they'd always been. I walked back to the register and didn't look at the mop sink again. At 3:05 a.m., the silver Honda Accord pulled into the lot for the second time that night. I was behind the register, trying to focus on inventory notes Mildred had left in a binder under the counter. Cigarette counts, mostly. I wasn't retaining any of it. I'd read the same line 4 times. Marlboro Reds, carton log, verify against delivery receipt, and none of the words were sticking. The headlights swung across the windows and I looked up. Same car, same parking spot near pump 1. The driver's side door opened and Doris Meyer got out. She was soaked. Her gray hoodie was dark with water, plastered to her shoulders and arms. Her hair hung loose now, not in a ponytail anymore, dripping onto her neck. Her jeans looked heavy, sagging slightly, and her running shoes squelched when she stepped onto the pavement. I stared at her through the window. Then I looked past her, out toward the highway, toward the sky above the pumps. It was clear. No clouds, no rain. I hadn't heard thunder, hadn't seen lightning. The pavement outside was dry except for the spots where she was walking. She pushed through the door and stopped just inside, leaving wet footprints on the tile. She was shivering. Not violent, just a slight tremor in her shoulders, her hands. She looked at me and I could see her face better now under the store lights. Pale, tired, eyes a little too wide. "I need a map," she said. Her voice was flat. Same words as before, but the urgency was gone. It sounded rehearsed, scripted. I didn't say anything yet, just watched her standing there, dripping onto my clean floor, looking like she'd been caught in a storm that didn't exist. "I took a wrong road," she said. "Past the turnoff you're not supposed to mention. There was a fence, a gate, signs all over it. No trespassing, restricted area, that kind of thing. I stopped the car and I was going to turn around, but my radio..." She paused. Her hands twitched at her sides. "My radio filled up with voices," she said. "Not music, not a station, just voices, calm, telling me to keep going, telling me the gate was open, that I should drive through, that someone was waiting. They knew my name." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What did you do?" I asked. "I turned around," she said. "I drove back." But the road didn't look the same. It was longer. And then it started raining, except... She gestured vaguely at the windows, at the clear night outside. It wasn't real rain. It was warm, and it didn't make any sound when it hit the car. She took a step closer to the counter. Her shoes squelched again. "I need a map to Oscura," she said. "Please. I just need to know how to get there so I can stop asking." The way she said it made my skin crawl. "So I can stop asking." Not because she wanted to go there, because she needed to ask. Like it was a task she'd been assigned. I thought about Rule 3. Politely decline. Do not provide written or verbal directions. I thought about the phone call, the voice that sounded like Mildred, telling me to open the beer cave, pressuring me, guiding me. Doris Meyer was being guided too. I could hear it in her voice. "I can't give you a map," I said. Her shoulders sagged a little. Relief, maybe. Or disappointment. I couldn't tell. "Okay," she said. "Okay." She didn't move toward the door. I looked at her. Soaked, shivering, eyes too wide. Standing in a gas station at 3 in the morning, asking for directions to a place she probably shouldn't go, saying things that sounded like someone else was feeding her the lines. I made a decision, probably a stupid one. "But I can tell you how to get back to US 54, I said. "The normal route, south toward Alamogordo or north toward Carrizozo. Your choice. No turnoffs, no side roads, just the highway." She blinked at me. "You'll do that?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Come on." I grabbed the keys from the hook under the register. Store keys, front door, back door, the one for the gas pump panel I hadn't needed yet. I walked around the counter and headed for the door. Doris Meyer followed me. I pushed the door open and stepped outside into the cool night air. The sky was clear, like I'd seen through the window. Stars everywhere. No rain. No clouds. The pavement was dry except for the wet footprints trailing from her car to the entrance. She stopped next to me, still shivering, water dripping from her hoodie onto the caliche dust. I pointed south down US 54 toward the faint glow of Alamogordo somewhere past the horizon. "That way takes you south," I said. "Straight shot, don't turn off. If you see a side road, ignore it. Just stay on 54 until you hit town." She looked where I was pointing, nodded slowly. "And north?" she asked. I turned and pointed the other direction, toward Carrizozo, toward the darkness where the highway disappeared into empty land. "Same thing," I said. "Straight through. No turns. You'll hit Carrizozo in 15 minutes, maybe less. There's a motel there if you need to stop." She was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at me. "Thank you," she said. Her voice sounded more like her own now. less flat, less scripted. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing water across her cheek. "You should get dry," I said, "and warm. You have heat in the car?" "Yeah," she said. "Yeah, I do." She walked toward the Honda, her shoes still squelching, and opened the driver's side door. Before she got in, she looked back at me. "The voices stopped," she said, "when I got close to your store. They just cut out." I didn't know what to say to that. She climbed into the car and shut the door. The engine started, a quiet hum, and the headlights came on. I watched her pull out of the lot, turning north onto US 54, her taillights bright red against the dark highway. I stood there until they disappeared. Then I looked down at the pavement where she'd been standing. The wet footprints were still there, dark patches on the pale caliche dust, but they were fading fast, drying, like the water had never been real to begin with. I turned and walked back inside, locking the door behind me. I stepped outside and locked the door behind me. The sound dropped, not gradually, all at once. The kind of silence you get when you're deep underwater or when your ears pop wrong on a long descent. The highway was still there. The rail yard lights were still burning maybe a mile south, but everything felt sealed, vacuum-packed. The lights looked too far away now, like someone had stretched the distance while I wasn't paying attention. I turned toward the pumps. Doris was standing beside her Honda with the driver's door still open, but she wasn't looking at the car. She was staring east, past the pumps, past the edge of the lot where the caliche dust gave way to scrub and low desert brush. She stood completely still. Her wet hoodie hung heavy on her frame, and her hair was still dripping, but she didn't shiver, didn't blink, just stared. Then a phone started ringing, steady, mechanical, the exact same rhythm as the back office phone. It was coming from beyond the dumpsters. I looked. There was nothing out there. Just the big green dumpster we use for trash, the smaller recycling bin beside it, and a stretch of gravel that turned into dirt and weeds about 20 feet out. No phone, no payphone pole, no building. The ringing kept going. 4 rings, 5. It didn't stop. Doris started walking toward it. Not slow, not hesitant. She moved with blank certainty, her wet shoes squelching on the pavement, her arms loose at her sides. She walked past Pump 2, past the edge of the lot, straight toward the dumpsters like she'd been called. I ran after her. "Hey," I said. "Stop." She didn't stop. I caught up and grabbed her wrist. Her skin was cold. Not wet cold. Dry cold. Like paper that's been stored in a freezer for months, brittle and wrong. I almost let go, but I tightened my grip instead, pulling her back a step. She turned her head toward me. Slow. Her mouth didn't move, but I heard her voice anyway. "You can fix this. Open the beer cave. Take the ice scoop inside, that's all. It's easy." Her lips stayed closed. The words came through clear and flat like they'd been placed directly into my skull. No breath, no tone, just instruction. I stared at her. Her eyes were gray-blue and completely empty. She wasn't blinking. The phone kept ringing behind the dumpsters, steady and patient, and I realized she wasn't asking me to help her. She was being used, a lure, a script, the same way the voice on the back office phone had sounded like Mildred, but wasn't. Whatever wanted me to open that beer cave had tried the phone first. Then Doris. Now both. I let go of her wrist. She didn't move. Just stood there staring at me with her mouth closed and her wet hair dripping onto the pavement. I ran. Back across the lot, my sneakers slapping hard on the caliche dust, my keys jangling in my hand. I slammed into the front door, shoved the key in the lock, twisted it, and pulled the door open so hard it bounced off the doorstop. I stumbled inside, spun around, and slammed the door shut. My hands shook as I turned the deadbolt. The store reacted. The overhead fluorescents flickered. Once, twice. Then they started stuttering in a pattern, on, off, casting everything in strobing bursts. The beer cave lock rattled. Hard, like someone was yanking the handle from the inside with both hands, metal grinding against metal in fast, violent jerks. The radio flipped to static, not gradual. It cut mid-song and the layered voices came back immediately. Flat, monotone, overlapping. 16 Mark IV, adjusting frequency. Countdown initiated, 10, 9. Repeat. Countdown initiated, 8, 7. My heart slammed against my ribs. The back office phone started ringing. I could hear it from Mildred's office. Same rhythm, same timing. I glanced at the doorway and saw the faint green glow of the caller ID through the gap. All soups. It had to be. The ringing matched the train horn's timing exactly. 2 long blasts, a pause, then another. 6, 5. The beer cave lock rattled harder. The handle jerked up and down so fast it blurred. 4, 3. I couldn't think. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the keys. The strobing lights made everything feel fractured and wrong. I looked at the register, at the laminated list still sitting on the counter where I'd left it. None of the rules covered this. I ran to the back hallway, past the mop closet, past the storage shelves, straight to the gray metal breaker panel mounted on the wall near the loading door. I yanked it open. Rows of black switches with faded labels written in Sharpie. Main, lights, register, cooler, gas pumps. I found the main breaker at the top, big, red, horizontal. I grabbed it with both hands and shoved it down. Everything died. The lights cut out. The cooler hum stopped. The static on the radio ended mid-word. The back office phone went silent. The beer cave lock stopped rattling. The fluorescents above me faded to black and the whole store dropped into darkness so complete I couldn't see my hands. I stood there breathing hard, my palms still on the breaker switch, my heart pounding in my ears. Silence, real silence this time. No hum, no static, no ringing. Just the sound of my own breath and the faint creak of the building settling. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. Nothing moved. Nothing rang. The countdown was gone. I let go of the breaker and felt my way back through the dark hallway, one hand on the wall, my sneakers squeaking on the tile. I passed the mop closet, the storage shelves, the office doorway where the phone sat silent on Mildred's desk. I made it back to the register area. The only light came from 2 glowing exit signs, one above the front door, one above the back hallway. Red, dim, just enough to see outlines. I crouched behind the counter, pulled the laminated list toward me, and held it in both hands. My fingers were still shaking. I stayed there, waiting, listening. The list felt solid, real. I focused on the air bubbles in the lamination and the smudged ink on Rule 6 and the way the edges were starting to peel. The clock on the wall was dead. No red digits. I had no idea what time it was. I stayed behind the counter with my back against the cigarette display and the exit signs glowing red above me. At some point, the sky outside started turning gray. I saw it through the front windows. Faint at first, then lighter. The horizon went from black to deep blue to pale orange, and I realized I'd made it. The sun was coming up. Headlights swept across the lot. I stood up, my knees stiff and aching, and looked through the window. A white Ford Explorer pulled into the parking space closest to the door. The rosary swung from the rearview mirror. Mildred. I walked to the breaker panel, flipped the main switch back up, and heard the store come alive. Lights, coolers, the fluorescent buzz. The radio started mid-song, something about a river and a summer night. I turned it off. I met Mildred at the front door and unlocked it. She stepped inside, looked at me, and frowned. "You look like hell," she said. Yeah. She walked to the counter, set down her keys and a travel mug that said, "But first, coffee," and waited. I pulled the folded receipt paper from my pocket, smoothed it out on the counter, and slid it toward her. She read it, every line. Her expression didn't change. When she finished, she looked up. "You cut the breaker," she said. "Yeah." "Good." She folded the paper once and tucked it into her pocket. "That's the real emergency measure. If everything happens at once, you kill the power, cuts the signal." "Signal," I repeated. She nodded. "Oscura's a facility road, old, restricted. People went out there in the 70s and 80s and didn't come back. The fence is still up, but the signals bleed through sometimes. Radio, phone, anything with a frequency." She tapped the counter. "This place sits right on the edge. We get spillover." I stared at her. "Spillover," I said. "Wrong transmissions, wrong calls. They try to pull people out there." She glanced at the beer cave. "The cave's connected to the old system somehow. Don't ask me how. Corporate doesn't explain it. They just tell us to follow the rules." I thought about Doris, about the phone ringing behind the dumpsters, about the hallway and the mop sink puddle. "The woman who asked for the map," I said. "Is she okay?" Mildred's jaw tightened. "If she stayed on 54, probably. If she didn't," she shook her head. "We can't fix that part." I pulled off my apron, folded it twice, and set it on the counter next to the register. "I quit," I said. Mildred didn't argue, didn't look surprised. "Understood," she said. I walked to the door, stopped, and looked back. "Good luck," I said. "You too." I left. The sun was fully up now, orange and bright over the desert. My hands were still shaking as I unlocked Angie's Civic and climbed inside. I started the engine, pulled out of the lot, and turned south on US 54 toward Alamogordo. I'd find another job, something that paid worse and didn't come with a laminated list. Mike still needed help with the tow bill, and I'd figure it out. I always did, but I wasn't going back to that store. I tried to be helpful, tried to do the right thing with Doris, and maybe I had. Or maybe I'd just opened a door I didn't understand, and now it wouldn't close cleanly. Either way, I was done. I kept my eyes on the highway and drove.